we're going to talk today about the Great Resignation. If you have some questions, you should be able to give those to us in the chat. We'll try to get some of those as we can. And if you stick around until the very end, we've got a special download for you, a PDF download that you can get access to. That, boy, I think it's like 35 pages of just all the research and intelligence that we've kind of picked up in the last 6 months or so on this topic that we're going to talk about today, Matt, which is the Great Resignation and what it means for your church.
Oh boy, that sounds like great fun. And one, like Todd said, if you guys got questions as we go along, one of the things, if you know me, you know that I'm like an ENFP, or I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, which means that distractions are actually make better presentations. So feel free to drop questions in the chat, and we'll try to speak to them as we can as we go along. So, Todd, why don't you throw up slide decks?
I just did. So we'll go ahead and get started here. First thing I want to kind of talk about, and we've got really 10 things that we're going to go over as to how what we're seeing in the Great Resignation will really apply to you and your church, or how it might apply to you and your church. But the first kind of thing that we want to kind of level set here at the very beginning is that all the talk you've been hearing about the Great Resignation is real. And I don't know how much you've read or how much you've heard on the news, but a lot of the national news has been talking about this kind of phenomenon they've been talking about. They call it the Great Resignation. And it's really, when it gets right down to it, it's just coming out of the pandemic that we've been in and all the economic things that are going on, that there's a lot of people right now, that have quit their jobs and are moving to either a different job or a totally different career. And at first, I really didn't think that this would have much of a ramification on the church. But the more I read, and the more that we talked to candidates and churches and really kind of put the two together, we found that, man, oh man, what's happening in the church really does correlate with a lot of the things that are happening in probably your town and all over the country when it comes to resignations and job markets and all of that kind of thing. So it's a real thing, and it has the potential to really significantly change how we do ministry in the coming months and years. Matt and I started to notice this when, Matt? Last spring?
March and April. Okay.
Yeah.
March and April, and where we really saw this start was in youth and worship roles. Mm-hmm. Not like combined roles, but particularly with youth and worship. And there's some people out there that, will fight me on this, but I think youth and worship both took COVID probably harder than any other position in the church. And mostly because those are the two roles where March of 2020, the senior pastor kind of came into their office and said, "Hey, innovate the church 30 years in 30 days." And all of a sudden they became the online campus pastor, for that next season. And that was their full-time job. And then people started coming back in person, and they had to do their full-time job as well as the online campus pastor thing. And next thing you know, they started burning out. And so most people kind of grit their teeth through Christmas, said, "Hey, 2021 is going to be normal." And we saw how that worked out. And so right around March and April of last year is when we started to see people flame out and move on, go sell real estate, go work at Home Depot, all that kind of stuff. Sorry, Todd, I think I just totally cut you off.
No. That's good. That's good. And we're gonna be talking about that, what you were just talking about here in just a little bit in one of our 10 points. But
I spoiled it.
We really want to talk about how this is going to impact, or how it may impact your church. And the bottom line reality, we think, is that if you lead a church or you're part of the church staff at any level, the information we're going to share today is really vital to the health and vibrancy of your church. We're really starting to see, and this is kind of, Matt, where I think you and I, and there's probably very few people that kind of have kind of the vantage point that we do on this topic. And it's not because we're anything great. We're far from that. But it's because we get to talk to so many churches and so many candidates. I mean, that's what we do all day, every day. And our whole team, we've got 45 people on our team. And that's what we do, is we talk to churches and we talk to candidates And that gives us kind of I think, a unique perspective on some of the trends and the things that are happening in churches that maybe you as working in your local church, you don't get to see because your focus is on your one church, where we're working with, literally hundreds of churches and thousands of candidates. And so what we're going to share today maybe is a little bit of a retrospect on what we're seeing and what we're learning in our conversations with other churches. Anything you'd want to add to that, Matt? Just, we've got kind of a unique perspective only because of kind of the role that we find ourselves in our daily work. So we're going to really talk, we're going to zoom through these fairly quickly and then hopefully get some time for some questions. But we're going to talk about 10 things that you need to know about the Great Resignation. We're going to talk about how to treat your current staff, how to keep your current staff, how to find new staff salary adjustments, how the Great Resignation is going to maybe change maybe the size of your church staff in the future. We're going to talk about staff motivation and pastoral versus platform, skills and hiring generalists and specialists, and compassion and empathy. And we're going to do that all in the next 30 minutes, Matt. Are you up for the task?
Oh, 30 minutes. That'll happen.
Yeah, we better get going. So, all right. So here's what our format's going to be. I'm going to kind of introduce each one of these 10 points. Turn it over to Matt. We're just going to have some good discussions. As you have questions, absolutely do add those to the chat box, and we'll try and get to those when we're all done with these 10 points. So the first thing we want to talk about is how to treat your current staff. And this is something that I read, and I wish I would have written down where I read it. It wasn't a church publication; it was a secular publication. But they mentioned that during 2022, that you kind of have, if you're a leader, that you kind of have to look at your team or your staff as all of them having one foot out the door. Okay, and that just kind of struck me because that's kind of what we've been seeing. The whole Great Resignation is talking about how many people are changing positions, and we're definitely seeing that in the church. We're seeing people change positions from church to church, but we're also seeing many people leaving ministry altogether. And really, in reality, many people are just, because of everything that's happened, it's been a tough go. You guys know this for the last 2 years in ministry. Many people are just currently reevaluating their family life. They're reevaluating their vocational life, their spiritual life. They're reevaluating their call to ministry. And that's causing many people to consider changing positions or changing roles. In many ways, this is just what we've seen, and Matt mentioned that we started starting to see this last spring, last March, April, May, and it's been going on for a while. But as with everything, it takes us a little while to kind of see the trends. But the reality of it is, and there's been some studies that show this, that up to half of your staff may consider leaving in the next 12 months. So it kind of goes back to that. Everybody has maybe one foot out the door. Now, does everybody on your team have one foot out the door? Boy, I hope not. But this is something that we're really starting to see, Matt, with, and it's really the heart of the Great Resignation as far as just the number of people that are leaving and how you need to treat your current staff. I mean, it starts with your current staff. You really need to build into your current team, and maybe just this perspective of knowing that there are so many people that are making transitions right now, and what you need to do to make them feel valuable as part of the team. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But all that's really, really important during this new year of making sure your team feels like they're a part of the team and that you treat your current staff well.
Yeah, and this bleeds into the next point of keeping your current staff. But so much of, the work that we need to be doing now is making sure our cultures are healthy, right? Make sure that our staff know that they are cared for, and creating creating a very safe environment to be able to have some of these conversations. A lot of times when we're in the midst of ministry crisis, we forget that we're supposed to be pastoring our staffs just as much as we're supposed to be leading our staffs. And so being able to have the conversation with them about, hey, I know this has been a rough season for you. How are you feeling about this? are you still being fulfilled here? Are you still, is this, how's your family in all of this? Making it a safe place to actually have those conversations. A lot of churches aren't necessarily, you start to say, maybe I'm thinking that, God might be calling us elsewhere. People are given a box, but if the way that we're going to treat our staff is not only going to affect, whether we retain our staff, but it's also going to, frankly, determine whether we retain the staff that we bring in to replace them. And that's one of those, one of the things that we've got the ability to really start to influence now.
Yeah, well, that kind of feeds in, Matt, to the second thing we wanted to talk about, and it has to do with your church staff health, and keeping your church staff that you currently have. And the key thing here, I love the phrase that people stay where they grow. Right. So if you do nothing but team build this year, you'll be ahead of the curve.
Yep. So
some questions to ask there. I mean, does your team feel valued? Coming out of the last 2 years, I think it's really, honestly, push back on me, Matt, but I think this is one of the reasons that so many people are transitioning from church teams and even out of ministry altogether, is they feel, and we're hearing this from candidates, many candidates that we talk to, many staff members feel like they've been a little bit kicked in the gut and kind of abused a little bit, maybe taken advantage of. No, that's not the case in every church, and hopefully not in your church, but perception is reality. And if people feel like they're not valued or they can't grow where they are, that's going to cause them to start looking. So some questions to ask. I mean, on your team, for your team members, is there room for advancement? Is there any place for them to go? Any place for them to mature? Are there mentoring opportunities? Is there an opportunity for input into decisions and directions? Now, that's different at every level of your staff, right? But do your staff just feel valued? And are there areas for growth, mentoring, spiritual growth, growth and opportunities for not only them, but for their family? All these things are just incredibly important when it comes to this number 2 item, keeping your current staff engaged and encouraged and there. Right, Matt, what would you add to this?
I don't know that I'd add anything to that, but I think one of the things that has surprised me the most over the course of this last 2 years, and I don't know that we had heard this before, is one of the recurring themes of people that are getting ready to leave their church is that, I feel like I've hit a glass ceiling.
Yep.
I don't feel like there is a growth plan for me. Right. I don't know that, I have a future here because nobody's talked about that. One of the things that we've seen this recurring theme, not just in the church, but also in the parachurch world, where, at one point, it was not uncommon for people to be, a career youth pastor, a career, worship pastor or something like that. I think there's some generational shifts that have gone on and really have kind of come to bear here in the last few years, but have just been accelerated during COVID. And there's people want to know, what is my career path? That's a common thing in the corporate world, the secular world, but never really has been much of a discussion in the church world. And part of what we would encourage churches to do is, if you're looking to keep, talented people on your team, you need to be thinking, hey, what is the progression of their vocation? What is the progression of their, and help them get there. Now, sometimes that might mean that you are developing great lead pastors for other churches, but that also could mean that you're developing your next lead pastor, which would be awesome as well. So either way, it's a win-win. But that development mindset is something that we need to be shifting in, and traditionally the church just hasn't done that very well. Same thing for your volunteer teams. just throw that out there as well. One of the things that we've noticed with churches is that they're struggling to get volunteers to re-engage. And a lot of times that's a result of not pastoring, not shepherding, not developing them, but just expecting them to show up and do a Sunday job. And so, your development pipeline, whether it's paid or unpaid team members, is super important right now to keep people engaged and continuing to lean in this coming season. So,
all right, very good. Very good. Keep the questions coming. We've got a couple questions already in that we're going to try and hit at the end here. So go ahead and pop those in the chat as you have them. We appreciate that. Let's talk about number 3, finding new staff. A lot of churches are coming out of the pandemic and really starting to open up the hose to hire new people. So what does the Great Resignation have to do with helping you find new staff? Well, here are some of the things that we've been experiencing. Experienced and qualified staff will be harder and harder to find. Now, that doesn't mean that they're not out there, but it does mean that they're, in many cases, if you start a new staff search, that finding the exact type of person that you're looking for can be harder and harder. And it's because bullet point number 2 there, many are leaving ministry and many are burned out, many are angry, or many are bitter. It seems to be getting maybe a little bit better, Matt, but I know the last half of last year, we really noticed this with a lot of the candidates that we were talking with, that they were kind of, I kind of mentioned it kind of being on a spectrum. One side is really healthy and the other side is man, they're ready just to, really not healthy. But so many candidates right now are burned out or are angry at the church or are even bitter. We've talked to a great number of candidates whose spouses have about had it with the church, just because of all the experiences of the last couple of years. So what that's caused us to do at Chemistry is we're interviewing a lot of candidates, is that we have to screen candidates on health. And if they're not healthy, we have to kind of have coaching conversation with them about you just really need to work on the anger, the bitterness, the burnout before they can take on another role. So as you interview people, you're going to find that people are tired and people are angry and some are bitter, and you're going to have to find those out. Finding new staff, Matt mentioned this, but children's youth worship have all been hit especially hard for some reason during the pandemic. A lot of that has to do with a lot of the pivots that have gone on internally with some of the online services and tech roles, and how children's and youth and worship positions in particular have changed over the past couple of years. It's in many churches, it's just totally changed. So that causes to make your church staff maybe a little bit harder. Might take a little bit longer just to find your staff member. So just count on however long you think it's going to take. It may take a little bit longer. And again, this is because of supply and demand. The supply of really good candidates, because so many people are burned out and so many people have left the ministry, the supply of candidates has come down, while the demand for candidates has gone up. There are a record number of churches right now that are looking to hire new positions. And that's kept us really busy, and we're very thankful for that. But a lot of churches are hiring, and it's just like I said, it's just like what's happening in the general marketplace. There's kind of a little bit of a decrease in candidates, and the jobs are very competitive. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit too. But my last point here, Matt, and then talk in, pick this apart if you want to, but we're finding that it's especially harder if you're trying to find what we call mid-career candidates or mid-career staff, people with 3, 5, 7, 10 years of experience. Those people are not all of them, but that's a group. The mid-career level people are a lot of the people that are being affected by the Great Resignation and determining that, hey, I'm going to go do something else for a period of time. I don't know that I'm going to work at a church. The last thing I'll say, Matt, there's always one more thing with me. When you're interviewing candidates, what you're going to find is, it used to be when you'd interview a candidate, the question that they would be asking is, do I want to work at your church? Right? Do I want to take this job at your church? Now they're asking a couple questions. They're like, do I want to work at your church? But the other question kind of behind the scenes is, do I want to work at a church? We're seeing this a lot. Calling has changed, and people are, when we're interviewing candidates, they're really trying to figure out, like I said, they're looking at family and career and spiritual health, all that kind of thing. They're just trying to figure out, hey, I know I'm going to go somewhere, but do I want to go to another church? Do I want to go, work at a local nonprofit? Do I want to go work at FedEx and put in my 8 hours, get some good insurance, and go home and spend time with my family and have my weekends to myself? Those are all questions that people are asking right now. And as you do a staff search, these are some of the things that you're going to kind of be up against. Matt, that sounds kind of bleak, but I mean, what are you kind of seeing, feeling, hearing out there?
Yeah. Yes, that. How's that for you? How's that for an answer?
Okay.
The big thing I'm telling churches right now is it's going a whole awful lot slower and a whole awful lot quicker.
Yeah.
Which that sounds like consultant speak, I know, but really what I mean by that is the process is taking a little bit longer just because of the amount of carnage that's been out there pastorally and how many people have left. And then when you find somebody, it's time to move quicker because it is a candidate's market. And what used to be a 90-day process, you probably need to speed up, to 30 or 45 days, because by the time you're getting ready to make an offer, it very well could be that, somebody else has already swooped in and taken, given an offer there. So that's what we're seeing. How does this relate to a new church plan or small urban church with a small attendance? I mean, in many ways, it's the same thing. If you're looking to bring in that staff member, whether it's a solo pastor or whatever, the people that you need to be making sure that people are healthy enough to make transition right now. Church health is the big thing. The recurring, Todd was talking about, people are asking, hey, do I want to be in a church in general? One of the biggest, the last 6 or 8 months, the most popular thing that people have been asking me to talk about at conferences is how do you know when it's time to leave your church and leave ministry in general? And so a lot of the conversations are along those lines. And so, ferreting out overall health level of the people that you're talking to is a huge thing, and making sure that they're in a place regardless of the church size. Sorry, I kind of went down a rabbit hole or rabbit trail there.
No, that's good. That's good. So finding new staff, especially experienced, qualified staff that you're really, if you're looking for something very narrow, it just may be harder to find this year. And the thing that we overlay on all of this, Matt, all the time is that none of this surprises God. God's not surprised at any of this. And he's not surprised if it's taken longer, and he's not surprised if it takes a short amount of time either. So you just kind of have to go in and realize that the landscape is a little bit different. If you hired somebody 2 or 3 years ago, the landscape is definitely different, and it's going to feel different as you kind of enter that staff hiring process. Couple of other things here we're going to talk about in number 4, staff salary adjustments. And this is one of the trends that we're seeing, and it's part of the Great Resignation too. It's a candidates market, and candidates are leaving jobs for other jobs that pay more money, and they pay more money because it's a little bit more competitive out there. This is starting to hit the church as well. Mm-hmm. So just so you know, it's more expensive everywhere, and for everything, right? You've got inflation. You've got that's up 7%, 7%, I think. Mm-hmm. So everything is more expensive. The economy is not as strong as what we'd like because of the inflation. World events just today, are going to affect the economy moving forward, and all of that is moving
You've got half of the four riders of the apocalypse right now. So, I mean, that's what we got, right?
It would appear that way. And what that's doing, and because, again, of the number of people that are burned out and the number of people that are leaving and the competitiveness of, I hate to say the church market, but the competitiveness of the space, is that salaries are going higher. Salaries are going higher, and new hires are going to be more expensive in most cases. So you really have to kind of consider the true cost. We're going to unpack this a little bit more in the next point, but you really have to kind of consider the true cost before you hire, because it is competitive out there. And, probably get in trouble here, but for the last 10 years, Matt and I have been in church ministry too. We've hired and we've been on church staffs. A lot of churches try and hire as low as they can, for stewardship issues. But the days of being able to hire to lowball a candidate or to bring in somebody for a really, really low salary and no insurance, those days are quickly coming to an end. Yeah. So know that it chances are your next hire is going to cost more than what it did a couple years ago.
It's not uncommon for somebody to make 45 with good insurance and tuition reimbursement at Amazon. And the side benefit of working at Amazon is that you don't get a phone call from Jeff Bezos at 11:30 p.m. on Friday night complaining about the volume of the worship music this last weekend, right? Or that the youth pastor has left the church van dirty or anything like that. I mean, and so we need to kind of take that in mind. And with that, there's some pretty clear staff size implications on that, right? For us as we look forward. We're probably the only search firm out there that will tell you, hey, it may be time to consider not hiring two people, but only hiring one, right? And using that to create a healthier financial package for the people that you bring in. Maybe it's time to go back to the drawing board as far as what how you're looking to staff out roles. One of the things that we've been talking a lot about is kind of getting away from the specialist and going back more to the generalist. And we'll get into this more later, but we found that if you're able to hire, that one role, and with somebody with a little bit more of a spread of a skill set that can pastor, that can develop people, that can really lean in, you end up having somebody with a higher capacity potentially for the longer term. And that ends up being healthier for your church and all, and ends up being, frankly, a better stewardship decision in a lot of ways. I don't know. Did I just say something that killed the business, Todd?
Yeah, most probably. But so this is, as Matt said, this is something, so we're co-founders here at Chemistry Staffing. If you're not familiar with us, we do managed searches for churches. Churches hire us to help them find candidates. So, right. So that's our business. So for us to say that, maybe consider hiring one person instead of two, this is really going to be more of an economic factor because the prices are going up and your church budget maybe is not. Limited dollars may force your hand. We're going to talk a little bit more about, like Matt said, in just a bit about some ramifications of that in other areas. But you share, Matt, kind of the number that you think the church probably would be better to get down to as far as staffing ratios. But it's weird for staffing guys to say, but for the past 10, 15, probably almost 20 years, many churches have been maybe overstaffed a little bit. And what the pandemic has done is maybe brought that back to a little bit more realistic and sustainable numbers.
Yeah.
Any thoughts on that, Matt?
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I love Tony Morgan's number. It's like 1 to 100, when you count, weekend attendance to full-time equivalents. I don't know that the American church is ever going to truly get there because it is pretty lean, but I love us having that goal. I think we're past the days of 1 to 50, 1 to 40, 1 to 12. I don't know, but I think that ends up being a little bit more healthy. And honestly, the cultural ramifications of that within the church, of forcing people to get involved and own different chunks of ministry, I think that's a significant benefit to the church as a whole. Anyhow, but that's just me.
Yep, I agree. Let's move on. Number 6. We got our first typo here for those who are keeping count on my slide presentation, but no one has the luxury of coasting anymore. If you're on, Matt's got 2. I'm surprised we haven't gotten more in the comments, but you can email us privately, all the comments on the spelling errors. But as far as it comes to staff motivation, no one's really going to have the luxury of coasting anymore. And I know that most church staff members are hardworking. I mean, literally getting paid for 40 hours and working 50 and 60. But we think there's still going to be a little bit of a lag time here. And we're just now maybe getting into it here in 2022, where some churches, last couple of years, they've seen kind of their attendance be constricted a little bit. This year might be the time where it starts to hit their budget, particularly with some of the things, inflation and things going on in the economy. So as the budget numbers get constricted a little bit, as you determine that it costs more to hire staff members, those that coast or those that aren't all in their current church roles will be held accountable eventually. And this is going to help weed out those that are working for the paycheck. Again, not a large number of people, but I've been on church staffs before, and there's different levels of people that are in. And some people are on a church staff. If you have anybody that's on your church staff that's only there because they don't know what else to do, those are the people that are going to eventually be held accountable. So this is kind of a negative point, Matt, but we're seeing it. Anything you would add to this one?
No, I think one of the biggest shifts that we saw in COVID was an increased value in agility.
Yep.
And people who are coasting aren't very agile. Mm-hmm. And so the churches that actually did well through the initial phases of COVID and saw more people coming and were super healthy and engaged were the ones where they went to their team and said, hey, guess what? I know that last week you were our graphic designer. This week you are one of our pastors of discipleship. Yeah. Go get on the phone, call 100 people, ask them how they're doing. And the people that were like, oh, no, I'm a graphic designer, or I'm a worship pastor, or I'm a kids person, I don't do adult discipleship. A lot of those guys were the ones that were coasting. And so agility is super huge right now.
Agility is the name of the game. It really is. And we saw people that it was really interesting, some of the stories we've heard of people that lead teams that thought going into COVID, this person probably is not going to be able to make it. They're not going to be able to be real agile. And they like turned it on, and they were able to really kind of pivot easily. There are other people that they thought were high potential and would be really agile that just couldn't do it. They weren't able to. And then there were those that just dug their heels in, like you said, Matt, that said, no, that's not what you hired me to do. I'm a graphic designer. I don't need to pick up the phone. Yeah. So all of those kind of factor into staff motivation. It's been a tough time for staff during these last couple of years. We're going to get to a couple of these next to our some of the more meaty things I think that we've kind of learned. And the first is the difference between pastoral and platform. And the way we put it is moving forward, that as you hire for your church, you're really going to want to try and hire pastoral first and then platform. Okay. So platform, let me describe that. Platform is really kind of what a lot of churches in America have been designed to do the last 10, 15, 20 years, which is, the big weekend experience, right? So anything that happens on the platform, anything that happens on the stage. If you're a children's ministry, it's the big group, right? If you're a youth pastor, it's the big group on Wednesday nights or Sunday nights. If you're the worship guy, it's preparing that that music presentation for Sunday morning. Platform is still important, but what we found during COVID was just like that. In a matter of hours, literally in a matter of hours, every church lost their platform, at least their in-person platform. So what became really important when churches couldn't meet for 2, 3, 6, 8 months, for that in-person platform, the pastoral part of the job role for many church staff were really elevated. And pastoral, by what we mean by pastoral, is pastoring, shepherding, one-on-one, small group ministry, connecting with people. Those are the types of things that have proven to be really, really valuable. Those that have been able to make that, to be agile and make the pivot from being primarily platform staff to pastoral staff have done really well. And it's really the return of pastoring. And we don't think this is a trend that's going to necessarily go away. Platform's not going away either. You still need to have platform people, but those platform people have to be agile enough to be able to pastor as well. And we're seeing that in staffing as well. As you go out to look for your next church staff person, whether it's a worshiper, senior, or whatever it is, you're going to want to make sure that they have that pastoral heart and that they're not going to, feel like they're just going to be a platform person.
Yeah, we talk about padding your team, because I went to seminary, and if you don't have an acronym or some sort of word play, then did you even go to seminary? But the whole idea is pastoral, agile, developer. Those are the three things that we're encouraging churches to look for. Somebody who gets the pastoral component of ministry, the person that's going to be able to care well for people, the people that are agile enough to shift when the next version of the apocalypse shows up on our doorstep, and is able to kind of figure out, hey, where do we move next? And then the development minded person, the person that can go and may not be the most incredibly gifted kids pastor or youth pastor or preacher or whatever, but knows how to recruit and develop people and unleash them to go and do the things that they're passionate about ministry wise. If you can get those three things in this next season, it will set you up really, really well. So sorry. I feel I was preaching.
No, that's good stuff. That's worth the price of admission, Matt.
Oh, shucks.
Yeah. Number 8 here, we're getting close here to the end, and then we'll answer some questions. Skill sets and hiring. Consider, and this is going to, again, seem really odd coming from a couple of church staff guys that work with churches and hiring. Because of everything that's going on in the marketplace and Great Resignation and all the things that we've talked to up to this and points 1 to 7, you may want to consider some internal hires that may have, get this, little or no ministry experience. Now that sounds really, really like you're just kind of letting down your guard and you want to hire anyone. That's not the case at all. But consider internal hires that may have little or no ministry experience if, and only if, you're willing to train and mentor people. Okay. Larger churches already do this. I did an experiment not long ago where I went to a few of the largest churches in the country, went to their LinkedIn pages and looked at the people that were on their team, on their staff, in some relatively high-level positions and some director roles. And it was amazing the number of people, as you on LinkedIn, you can go and view their everybody's resume and kind of where they've been. So many of those churches, the larger churches, are hiring marketplace people. They're hiring people that were attenders of their church, that were key volunteers, that they saw potential in. And because they were able to and willing to train and mentor people, they were willing to give a chance to these people to come in. And many of them are just turned out to be absolutely dynamite staff members.
Yeah.
So maybe you're overlooking somebody. Is there a key volunteer that's just killing it on your team? You have people that, going back to what our previous point, that are pastoral, that just love people, are passionate about people, passionate about ministry. If you're willing to train and mentor some of these people might actually be really great additions to your team.
And honestly, and this sounds horrible based on what we've already said, but a lot of times you get them at a discount, right? They are most likely going to be taking a pay cut to come take this role, but at the same time, hiring internally ends up being significantly cheaper than hiring externally.
And they already love you. They love you. They love your church. They get your culture. They get your DNA, and they've already dug in. So, and honestly, that's one of the first things we talk to when we talk to churches is we ask them, do you have any internal candidates that maybe you just have kind of overlooked a little bit that you need to take a good look at. So anyway, that's point number 8. We got to keep speeding through here, Matt. Number 9 is generalists versus specialists. Prioritize what we think churches should be doing, and hopefully we'll start doing more and more, is prioritize hiring generalists over specialists. And this is kind of a throwback to maybe 20, 25 years ago, where, you didn't have all of these really tightly defined roles. You didn't have a pastor of discipleship for middle schoolers, or, or a director of, I don't want to pick on anybody, but back then, back in the day, you had maybe an associate pastor of worship, but maybe he also did discipleship, or she also did, care ministry or something like that. But there were a lot more generalists back in a previous time. Hire the person over the role is what we're seeing that probably needs to happen more. Find a person that fits your church, fits your community, fits your team, and then deploy them where they're gifted and where the need is. So, and again, this goes back to what Matt was talking about, agility. You want to hire people that are pastoral, but are agile, and people that can maybe fill a couple of the different holes that you've got, but because they're very gifted and talented in ministry, they can do that and feel fulfilled in that. Thoughts on that, Matt?
No, I have no thoughts whatsoever.
You have no thoughts on that?
No thoughts whatsoever on that. No, I feel like I've gushed a lot about the generalist piece. Just because I think, it's a throwback to the associate pastor area. I think what we're seeing church wide is we are seeing a bifurcation in church size, right? I think the mid-sized church has been drying up for years, and we're getting both smaller and larger. And there's not a whole awful lot of growth in that middle. And so, larger churches are going to be able to afford to do some specialists. I don't think they're going to be able to afford to do as many specialists as they traditionally have. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, most larger churches also have a pretty healthy, vibrant volunteer culture, right? And so they're getting their developers, and they're getting people that are agile enough and all that kind of stuff. The smaller churches are really where we're going to need that associate pastor back. And we're starting to see churches talk through, hey, yeah, we need somebody that can do family student ministry, something like that. But they also need to have, the ability to do 20% of their time somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And if you've got some flexibility, that makes it a little bit easier to hire. But, you need to have, I think that's where we're going to see this stuff push to.
Yep. Absolutely. And then finally, number 10, then we'll get to your questions. Just a word on compassion and empathy in staffing and with your team and with people as you think about bringing new people onto your team. And I think this is universal, at least from what we're hearing from people, is that we're all tired. Everybody. I don't know that I've talked to, there's a few oddballs out there, but that are, it's not that people have lost their enthusiasm or their energy or their passion for ministry, but the last 2 years have been really tough for everybody, and we're all tired. And we just have to remember, I think it's Rick Warren that says, and he probably got it from somebody else, that hurt people hurt people. And when you're tired and when you're a little hurt or burned out, it's sometimes hard to treat people well. So that's just our admonition to you as you work with your current team, as you look at bringing new people on, as you work with people in your congregation, for crying out loud. treat them well. We have no idea some of the struggles that they've been going through that have only been, exasperated even more by COVID and everything else that has gone on in the church and their family and in their lives in the past couple of years. So treat people well. Right, Matt?
Be nice to people.
Be nice to people.
I think Jesus said something like that.
It seems like that's in the Bible somewhere. It's got to be, right?
Yeah, and if you're going through a staff search, can I go down this road, Todd? Is that allowed?
I'm not sure which road you're going down, but I'll tell you to stop if you need to.
Okay, even better. So if you're going through a staff search, kindness will serve you well. Okay.
Yes.
Part of the reason why we got into this is because we were tired of candidates just getting the snot kicked out of them and either leaving ministry altogether or just kind of giving up on looking for their next role because of how they were treated through it. And it's not that we're intentionally mean as churches or anything like that, but it's just that sometimes we can forget some things. And so realize that somebody that's in a season of transition is in a very lonely, confusing place. Typically don't have anybody to kind of process through what's going on and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Todd, you're tired of me talking about this, but for those of you that are very familiar with Starbucks, they have what they call the third space, and they're basically monetizing church stuff and getting really rich off of it because they would say that your first space is your home life, your second space is your work life, the third space is your community space where everybody comes together. And so Amazon or Starbucks is that third space where everybody comes to drink overpriced coffee and hang out and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if that actually happens, but that's what they talk about. Ministry types, we do not have three spaces in our life. We can talk about whether that's healthy or not, but I don't have time for that because it just kind of is. Our home life bleeds into our church life. Our work life is our church life. Our community is our church. And so when people are getting ready to transition, all three of those areas bleed over, and you really can't talk about what's going on. You can't really talk about why you're thinking you're leaving. But what you're thinking is, I'm leaving my community. I'm leaving most of my friends. I am uprooting my family and potentially taking them somewhere way different. And I'm leaving a job that I either really love or don't love so much right now. And so a little bit of kindness on the part of the church that they are applying to, whether you give them a job or not, is going to serve you well and serve the kingdom well. So just be kind. And part of what we mean by being kind is, be clear with people. Don't be mean when you do it, but be clear with people whether you're moving them forward or not, and just communicate with them on a regular basis with intention. Don't let things go, 90 days between emails or anything like that. So I can preach a whole sermon on that, Todd, but nobody wants to hear that. So I'll probably stop there.
Yeah, you're right. I am getting tired of hearing you talk about that, but no, I'm just kidding.
But not really.
All right. Well, we mentioned, and we're running out of time quickly, so we're not going to be able to answer a ton of questions. But at the very beginning, we're going to answer a few. At the very beginning, we mentioned that we have a special download available for everyone, and I'm going to hopefully this should show up for you there on your screen. We have this PDF download called The Great Resignation, How the Nation's Changing Employment Trends Will Affect Your Church. Totally available to you free. You can go and download that. You can just go. It's kind of covering up there with our pictures, but it's just chemistrystaffing.com, Great Resignation, or I think you can just click the link there as well. Matt, we also we work with churches all the time. So if you need a little bit of help with staffing or want to have a conversation with Matt or one of the members on our team here about what it might look like for us to help you with a search, tell them a little bit more about how they can do that.
Yeah, if you you can go to our website, chemistrystaffing.com/let's talk, and let's talk. We'd love to learn a little bit more about what's going on with your church, see how we can serve, see how we can guide you through the process, and and if at the very least give you some tools to be able to lean into your search process. So.
Awesome. All right, Matt, how do you want to tackle these questions here? I know you've been pinging me here with some of these. You want me just to ask some questions and
Go for it.
We'll see how many we can get through here in the last 7-8 minutes here. Gary asks, are you seeing different degrees of all of this Great Resignation stuff happening in urban versus suburban versus rural congregations, smaller churches, larger churches? Does it make a difference, or are you seeing this all across the board?
I think I'm seeing it all over the place. I think it looks a little bit different based on where it is, but I think for the most part, we're watching guys in smaller churches leave. We're watching bigger church. It's all across the board.
Yeah, I would say the same thing. It doesn't make any difference your church size. It doesn't make any difference if you're rural or if you're metro in the middle of a city. What we're seeing as far as the ramifications of the Great Resignation and people kind of reevaluating all those different areas of their lives and deciding to move or pivot out of ministry or to a different ministry position. It's all across the board. So very good. Let's see. Jim asks, he's looking, he says he's looking for a church role, but it says many churches seem to want a 20-something with 40 years of experience. We've not worked with any of those churches, Matt.
No,
but we try not to actually. But what would you say to somebody that is just like, maybe you're a little older, maybe you're just not able to find something right now?
Okay. How much time do we have? 30 seconds. Yikes. Okay. Couple things. One, God is not surprised by your search. He is completely aware of it. Second thing is I would be pretty intentional about what you're looking for church wise. It might be time to widen the net a little bit, because a couple things. You don't share your age in this, but what you do say is that you've been out of church ministry for quite some time, and you allude to the fact that you're a little bit older. A couple of the realities of the situation is that every church search team that you talk to, this is not fair, this is not right, it just kind of is going to add 15 years to who you are now. And they're going to say, hey, is this person going to be able to be here in 15 years? And everybody makes that judgment on their own. Again, it's not fair, because some of the strongest pastors I know are older and are doing great ministry. And so there's pieces of this where you just kind of need to go in and understand that it's going to take a little bit of time, and you probably need to widen your net. Now, don't violate any non-negotiables for this, but understand it's going to be a bit of a slow roll. Todd, what would you add to that?
I think you're right. I'm going to go back to what I said earlier, that, and this sounds like it's a patsy answer, but God's not surprised by this. And just know that what I tell candidates when they're having trouble in these kind of areas is that those kind of, if God has called you, God has a place for you, and he's not surprised by it. And while it might just take a little longer to find that kind of a church. So hang in there. I think probably you're over-exaggerating, is that a term? When you say churches are looking for, 20-year-olds with 40 years of experience, I get that. But there are churches out there that are looking for somebody probably just exactly like you, but it's just going to take you a little bit longer to find. So hang in there and keep going with that. I think it was, let's see, Gene mentions, it's more of a comment than a question, I think, but he says, I've seen so many churches still focusing on getting back to where we were before COVID versus taking an honest assessment at where the culture is now and the best way to move forward in the new format and the new normal. And I think an angel loses its wings every time we use the term new normal. I'm so tired of that new normal phrase. But Matt, I think we have seen, and it's one of the more, for me personally, one of the more discouraging things is the number of churches that are just trying to get back to, if we can just get back to the way it was in February of 2020, that everything will be great. Well, I think, and one of the reasons we're doing this webinar today is that things have changed. Things have changed, and things are going to look different in this next season of ministry, not only with your staff, but also with your church. It's going to look different with the way you staff your church. It's going to look different with the ministries that you have and that you offer in your church. And there's just going to be some shuffling around to kind of move to this next chapter. And the churches that, it was another comment that we got that I thought was really good. I think also from Gene, that just said, the churches that have really kind of leaned in, as we talked about today, to the pastoral, are the churches that are really coming out of this season with a really healthy base that they can kind of move forward. Anything with that, Matt? That
not that won't get me fired.
Cool. Let's see if we've got one more question here.
John Yenchko from beautiful scenic Long Island, America.
There we go.
Says, what technical requirements and skills should we require of pastoral and ministry staff? What should we look for? What's the minimum?
Well, that opens up a whole can of worms. So, because we kind of talked about, let's first start with what type of what kind of a position is it? Is it a ministry type role? Is it a coordinator type role? What is kind of required by either your church or your denomination as far as educational things? We have churches that, have certain parameters that they need to work in as far as experience and education. But overall, I mean, the last 10 years have seen a real shift in not only the experience that churches are looking for, but education that churches are looking for. Many churches, for some roles, aren't requiring a whole lot of education. They're relying much more on experience. And then as we kind of open up the can of worms today, is that you might hire somebody, an internal candidate for certain types of roles that maybe have no paid staff ministry experience, but are just sharp people that have a pastoral heart, that love people, and that can be mentored and trained to be a really great staff member for you. So it's really all over the place. It depends on your church. It depends on the role, and it could be anything from no church experience to masters or D-men or whatever, according to what church you're in. That's not really a helpful answer, Matt. Help me out here.
So technical requirements and skills, people need to be able to use cell phones and text messages. You need to have a basic understanding of social media right now. I think it's helpful to at least understand, how to use church management software platforms, because those are becoming more and more. Now, do they have to be, specifically skilled in Planning Center? No, but they need to have a general understanding of how those things work so that they can pick it up. I'm more concerned with their ability to learn it on the fly than I am with their specific skill set. The biggest things, it used to be, hey, you need to be able to use Excel and Word and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not super concerned about that as much as I am with communication platforms. And the ability to use communication platforms for the church as a whole. The other piece is this, and this is a little bit of a pet peeve for me. This isn't a classic technical skill, but if people need to be able to write, okay? One of the things that really irritates me is how poorly worded and grammarized. That's not a good word. And here I am, on my soapbox talking about grammar. But people need to know how to write and write well and write compelling. And I don't think we do that anymore as a society. And in many ways, the church world, I mean, we are a communications business, pardon that phrase. But, we need to be able to communicate well through the written word, whether it's, whether it's communicating clearly on Facebook posts, on, through Twitter, through text messages, through newsletters, written, all of that kind of stuff. I think that's one of the forgotten technical skills that we've kind of let slide through the years. And so that's really, those are the big things that for a staff member. A lot of the other stuff we can, a lot of those other technical skills, we can get volunteers that have the ability in that. But if you can learn and adapt and at least understand the need for some of the technology, that's huge. And if you can write, man, God bless you. I'll take 7 of you.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. We went 3 minutes over, Matt.
Oh dear.
Yes. I'm not surprised, but, appreciate everybody showing up here. We are going to send you a link. I think it takes about 24 hours or so to generate the link of the recording of this, in case you want to either share this with members of your team, your elder team, your board, your staff, whatever, you can do that. But we'll make that available to you afterwards. And if you have any questions at all, you can contact Matt or I. Just go to the chemistrystaffing.com website, and you'll find in the navigation there a way that you can connect with us there. So any parting words, Matt?
Thanks for sticking with us this whole time.
Yeah.
Hope this was helpful. Love to be able to if there's anything we can do to serve you guys in this, whether it's search related or just kind of think in ministry, that's a big part of why we're here is there. So I hope you'll take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd love to connect. So great. Thanks so much.